Welcome to the Mrs. Silva Reading and Writing Show.
We usually want, whenever it's a hot summer day, maybe something cold like a popsicle or something like that. Well, Jesse and Evan thought, well, you need some lemonade, right? Everybody wants a cold glass of lemonade when they're hot on a summer day. So as we go through chapters 3 and 4, pick up a nice cold glass of lemonade and let's see what happens in the Lemonade War. Chapter 3 of the Lemonade War. Joint venture. Joint venture is a noun. Two or more people joining forces to sell a certain amount of goods or to work on a single project. When the goods are sold or the project is finished, the joint venture ends. Your sister is really... Shut up, said Evan. Huh? Just shut up. She's okay. She doesn't... Look, she's okay, so just shut up. You okay? Said Scott, holding up his free hand to show he meant peace. Evan was getting abused on both sides. The heavy cooler was banging against his inside leg with every step, and the plastic chairs were scraping against his outside leg. Bruised and bloodied, he thought to himself, all for the fun of hanging out with Scott Spencer. Why couldn't Jack have been home, or Ryan? And why did Adam have to be on the Cape this week? It stunk. How far are we walking? Grunted Scott. Just to the corner, Evan watched as the drops of sweat fell off his face and landed on the hot sidewalk. We should have stayed in the driveway. It was shaded. The corner's better, trust me, said Evan. He remembered when Jesse had said the same words to him last summer. They were setting up a lemonade stand together, and Evan had been grumbling about dragging the cooler across the street and down two houses, just like Scott. But Jessie had insisted. There's sidewalk on this side, she said, so we'll get the foot traffic coming in both directions. And people in cars coming around the curve will have time to see us and slow down. Besides, there are a bunch of little kids on the side street, and their mothers won't want them crossing Damon Road. The corner's better, trust me. And she was right. They'd made a ton of money that afternoon. It took 10 seconds to set up the lemonade stand. Evan unfolded the chairs and set one on each side of the cooler. Scott tilted the sign toward the street for a maximum effect. Then they both sat down. Man, is it hot, said Evan. He took off his baseball cap and wiped the sweat from his face with his shirt. Then he grabbed an ice cube from the cooler, balanced it on his head, and stuck his cap back on. Yeah, said Scott, I'm thirsty. He reached into the paper bag and pulled out a cup. It was one of those large red plastic cups that vendors use at professional baseball games. Then Scott took one of the pitchers from the cooler and filled the cup to the brim with lemonade. Hey, not so much, said Evan, pouring himself a cup too, but only partway. He glugged down half his drink. Not bad, he thought, though he noticed a dead fruit fly floating on the top. His mom had been battling a mad fruit fly infestation ever since the weather had turned really warm. The kitchen sink area, where they kept their fruit bowl, was dotted with tiny, feathery fruit fly corpses. Scott drained his cup and tossed it on the ground. Ah, he said, satisfied. That was good. I'm going to have another. Evan reached for the trash cup and stowed it under his seat. Nah, come on, Scott. You're going to drink all our profits if you do that. He stretched his legs out by putting his feet on top of the cooler. Just chill. I'm going to chill by having another cup, said Scott. There it was, that mean bite in Scott's voice. Evan's shoulders tensed up. Move your feet, said Scott. It's hot out here. Dude, you're... Evan sat up expectantly and looked down the street. Hey, here comes our first customer. A mother pushing a double stroller came into view. At the same time, one of the kindergartners from down the street rode her bike up, noticed the sign, and quickly pedaled back to her house. Within 5 minutes, there was a small crowd of neighborhood kids and pedestrians buying lemonade from the stand. Evan let Scott handle all the money while he took care of the pouring and the sweet talk. That's what his mother called it when a salesperson chatted her up. Trust me, she had once told Evan and Jesse, buying something is only half about getting something. The other half is all about human contact. Mrs. Tresky knew about these things because she was a public relations consultant. She'd even written a booklet called 10 Bright Ideas to Light Up Your Sales for one of her clients. And Evan was like her. He was good at talking with people, even grown-ups. It was easy for him. So he kept the conversation flowing along with the lemonade. People hung around. Most of them bought a second cup before they left. Evan was so busy he almost didn't notice Jessie, flying out of the garage on her bike and riding down the street toward town. Good riddance, he thought, but at the same time he wondered where she was going. During a lull in business, Evan walked all around the stand picking up discarded plastic cups. Scott sat in his chair, jingling the coins in his pocket. Man, we are going to be so rich, said Scott. I bet we made $5 already. I bet we made 10. How much do you think we made? Evan shrugged. He looked at the stack of used cups in his hand and counted the rims. 14. They'd sold 14 cups so far, and each cup of lemonade cost 50 cents. Evan heard Mrs. DeFazio's voice in his ear. Mrs. DeFazio had been his third-grade teacher, and she'd done everything she could to help him with his math. If 1 cup of lemonade sells for 50 cents and you sell 14 cups of lemonade, how much money have you made? Word problems. Evan hated word problems, and this one was impossible anyway. He was pretty sure the right equation was 14 times 50 equals. But how was he supposed to solve that? That was double-digit multiplication. There was no way he could do a problem like that. And besides, some of these 14 people had bought refills, but used the same cup. How many? Evan didn't know. Still, he knew they'd made a pretty good amount of money. That estimate was close enough for him. How much do you think we could make if we sold it all? Asked Scott. I don't know, said Evan. Maybe $20? That sounded high even to him, but Evan was an optimist. Do you really think? Both boys looked in the cooler. 3 pitchers were empty. They only had half a pitcher left. You were pouring the cups too full, said Scott. You should have poured less in each one. You're the one who brought the huge plastic cups. You could fit a gallon in one of those, said Evan. Besides, I wasn't going to be chintzy. They're paying a whole $50 for it. They deserve a full cup. And anyway, we can just go home and make more. My mom has cans of lemonade in the freezer. So go home and make more, said Scott. Oh, yes, Your Majesty. Oh, High Commander, Your Infiniteness. Why don't you go make it? 'Cause I'm chillin', said Scott, leaning back in his chair with a stupid grin on his face. Evan knew he was just joking, but this was exactly why he didn't like Scott. He was always thinking of himself and always looking for some way to come out on top. If they were playing knockout, Scott always came up with a new rule that helped him win. If they were doing an assignment together, Scott always figured out how to divide it so he had less work to do. The kid was a weasel. No 2 ways about it. But everyone was out of town. Everyone else was out of town. Evan didn't want to spend the day alone. And Jessie was on his poop list, as Mom called it when the dog did something he wasn't supposed to do. Evan might never play with Jessie again. Evan crossed the street and went into the house. He was surprised to find that there were no more cans of lemonade in the freezer. Wow, there had been so many this morning. Luckily, there was a can of grape juice in the freezer and a bottle of ginger ale in the fridge. It'll work, he thought. People just want a cold drink. They don't care if it's lemonade. He mixed up the grape juice at the sink. The fruit flies were more out of control than ever. Thanks to the lemonade the boys had dribbled on the countertop. Evan swatted a couple, but most of them drifted out of his reach and settled on the fruit bowl. He wished his mother believed in chemical warfare, but for Mrs. Tresky, it was all natural or nothing. Usually, nothing. When he went back outside to the lemonade stand, Evan noticed that the last pitcher was turned upside down on the cooler. Ah, come on, Scott, he said. What? It was hot, and you said we could always make some more. Yeah, well, we didn't have as much in the house as I thought. I've got grape juice and ginger ale. I hate ginger ale, Scott said. I wouldn't give you a penny for it. It turned out that a lot of people felt the same way. Business was definitely slower. The day got hotter. The sun beat down on them so ferociously that it was easy to imagine the sidewalk cracking open and swallowing them whole. Fanning himself, Evan asked, "How much money do you really think we could make?" "I don't know," said Scott, pushing his baseball cap down over his eyes. "I mean, on a hot day like this," Evan said silently, adding the words, "or tomorrow. If we sold 8 pitchers of lemonade, what do you think we'd each make?" 8 pitchers. "I don't know." Scott shook his head. His baseball-capped face wagged back and forth. "Too hot for math. And it's summer." Evan pulled the red pen out of his pocket and started to write on the palm of his hand. 8 times 50 divided by 2? That didn't seem right. Jessie would know. She'd do that math in a second. Evan capped the pen and jammed it into his pocket. "But I bet it's a lot," said Evan. "I bet on a hot day like this, we could actually make some real money in the lemonade business." "Yeah," said Scott. "Then we'd be rich, and I'd get an Xbox, the new one with the dual controls." "I'd get an iPod," said Evan. He'd been saving for one for over a year, but every time he had some money put away, well, it just disappeared. Like the $10 from Grandma. She'd even written on her card, "Here's a little something to help you get that music thing you want." But the money was gone. He treated Paul and Ryan to slices of pizza at Townhouse. It had been fun. "That would be so great to listen to music whenever I want," said Evan. I could tune you out," he added in his own head. They sat in silence, feeling the heat suck away every bit of their energy. Evan was hatching a plan. The heat was supposed to last at least 5 days. If he and a friend, not Scott, set up a lemonade stand every day for 5 days, he'd definitely have enough to buy an iPod. He imagined himself wearing it as he walked to school, wearing it on the playground. "Hey, Megan, yeah, it's my iPod. Sweet, huh?" Wearing it in class when the teacher droned on about fractions and percents. Nah, but it would be so cool. At least there would be one thing that didn't totally stink about going back to school. After 2 hours, they decided to call it quits. Cells had dropped off fast and then stopped altogether. "Hey, did you notice something?" asked Evan, stacking the chairs. "What?" said Scott. "When we started the stand, most of our business came from that direction." He pointed down the street toward the curve of the road. "But after 1 hour, not one person who walked past us from that direction bought a cup. Not one. They all said, 'No thanks,' and kept on walking." "Why do you think?" "Dunno," said Scott. "Boy, you're a real go-getter," said Evan. "You know that?" Scott socked him in his chest, but Evan defended and knocked Scott's cap off. While Scott was scrambling for his hat, Evan said, "Just hang here for a minute, okay?" and set off down the street. As soon as he rounded the curve, he knew why business had fallen off so badly. There was Jessie and Megan Moriarty from his class. They were standing inside a wooden booth, and their sign said it all. Lemonade, frosty, delicious, thirst-quenching. Wow, only 50 cents per cup. By the looks of it, their business was booming. Evan watched as Jessie accepted a fistful of dollar bills from a mother surrounded by kids. At that moment, Jessie looked up and saw him. Evan had a weird feeling, like he had been caught cheating on a test. He wanted to run and hide somewhere. Instead, he froze. What would Jessie do? Evan couldn't believe it. She sneered at him. She cocked her head to the side and gave him this little, "I'm so much better than you" smile. And then she waved the money in her hand at him. She waved it as if to say, "Look how much we've made selling lemonade. Bet you can't beat that." Evan turned on his heel and walked away. Behind him, he could hear Megan Moriarty laughing at him, clear as a bell. Chapter 4, Partnership. Partnership is a noun, 2 or more people pooling their money, skills, and resources to run a business, agreeing to share the profits and losses of that business. Jessie had been waiting for this moment, the moment when Evan would see their lemonade stand, see the wonderful decorations they had made, see the crowds of people waiting in line, see Megan Moriarty standing by her side. He would see it all and be so impressed. He would think to himself, wow, Jessie is one cool kid. She sure knows how to run a lemonade stand, right? And then he'd jog over and say, hey, can I help you out? Or can I help out? And Jessie would say, sure, we were hoping you'd come over. And it would be like old times. Why hadn't it worked out like that? With one part of her brain, Jessie continued to take money from customers and make change. That was the part of her brain that worked just fine. With the other part of her brain, Jessie went over what had happened with Evan. That was the part of her brain that tended to run in circles. She and Megan were selling lemonade. Business had been good. Then Mrs. Polly, a neighborhood mom, walked up. She had had a bunch of kids in her backyard running through the sprinkler, and now they wanted 12 cups of lemonade. 12! It was the biggest sell of the day. Megan got cracking, pouring the lemonade, and Jessie took the 6 singles that Mrs. Polly handed her. All the kids from Mrs. Polly's backyard were chanting, lemonade, lemonade, lemonade. A fly buzzed by Jessie's ear. They had been having a problem with flies because of the sticky lemonade spills on their stand, and she cocked her head to one side to shoo it since her hands were busy with the money. And that's when Jessie looked up and saw Evan standing there, staring, so she smiled back. But he didn't smile back. So she waved. Even though she had all the money in both hands, she waved so he'd know that she was happy to see him. And then he stalked off, all stiff-legged and bristly. And she never got to say, sure, we were hoping you'd come over, like she'd rehearsed in her head. And just then, Tommy Polly, who was 2 years old, pulled down his bathing suit and peed right on the lawn. And Megan laughed so loud, Jessie was sure she could hear it all over the neighborhood. That's what had happened. That's exactly what had happened. But Jessie knew that something else entirely had happened, and she didn't get it, the way she didn't get a lot of things about people. All she knew was the sight of Evan walking away from her for the second time that day, made her feel so sad and alone that she just wanted to run home to her room and curl up on her bed with Charlotte's Web. Hey, Madame Cash Register, said Megan, nudging her. You're falling behind. Ring 3 for this lady and 1 for this kid here. Jessie turned away from the retreating figure of Evan. That's $1.50, she said to the woman standing in front of her. She took the $5 bill the woman was holding and made change from her lockbox, focusing all of her energy on the part of her brain that worked just fine. It's true that when Evan had first walked out of the garage, Jessie had banged up to her room and tried to think of every way possible that she could make his life a living misery. She thought of telling Mom that Evan was the one who broke the toaster by playing hockey in the house, which was not allowed. She thought of taking back every one of her CDs from his room, even though she knew that would mean she'd have to give back all of his CDs. She even thought of putting peanut butter in his shoes. This was something she'd read in a book, and she loved to imagine that moment of horror when he'd think he'd somehow gotten dog dew inside his shoes. But when these ideas had finished bouncing around her brain, and when her breathing had returned to normal and her fists weren't clenched at her sides anymore, she knew that what she really wanted was to get the old Evan back, the one who was so much fun to be around, the one who helped her out of every jam. Like when she ate all the Lorna Doones that Mom had set aside for the Girl Scout meeting, and Evan had ridden his bike to the 7-Eleven and bought a new package before Mom even noticed. Or when she accidentally, well, not accidentally, but how was she supposed to know, picked the red flowers in Grandma's garden that were a hybrid experiment. Evan had said they'd both done it so that Grandma's disappointment was spread around. Or the time that Jessie had snatched the ceramic heart that Daddy had given her because she was so mad that he had left them. And then, when she had cried about her broken heart, Evan had glued every single last piece back together again. She wanted back the Evan who was her best friend. But Evan didn't want her because he thought she was a baby and she was going to embarrass him in Mrs. Overton's class. So she had to prove to him that she was a big kid, that she could keep up with the crowd, that she could fit in, even with his 4th grade class. I'll show him I can sell lemonade too, just as good as him and Scott. I won't embarrass him. So Jessie got down to business. She knew she needed a partner. From past experience, she'd learned that having a lemonade stand alone wasn't considered cool. It was considered pathetic. And her partner would have to be a fourth grade girl because that's what this was all about, showing she could fit in with the fourth graders. So the question was, who? It had to be a girl who lived in the neighborhood, or at least close enough to bike to her house. And it had to be someone that Jessie had talked to at least once. No way could she call up a girl she'd never even talked to. And it had to be someone who seemed nice. This last part was a problem because Jessie knew that she often thought people were nice and then they turned out to be not so nice. Case in point, those second grade girls. So Jessie decided that it had to be someone who Evan thought was nice. Evan knew about these things. He was the one who had explained with his big arm around her shoulder, "Jessie, those girls are making fun of you. They are not nice." When Jessie thought about all these different requirements, there was only one obvious answer: Megan Moriarty. She lived less than 3 blocks down the street. Jessie had said hi to her a few times while biking in the neighborhood, and Evan must have thought she was nice because Jessie had found a piece of paper in his trash can with Megan's name written all over it. Why would he cover a page with her name if he didn't think she was a nice person? Jessie went to the kitchen, climbed onto a stool so that she could reach the cabinet over the stove. She took down the school phone book and looked through the listings for both of last year's third grade classes. No Megan Moriarty. Duh, Jessie remembered. She moved in halfway through the school year. With a sinking heart, Jessie checked the town phone book. No Moriarty family listed on Damon Road. Okay, said Jessie, slapping the phone book shut and putting it back in the cabinet over the stove. Time for plan B. Jessie went to the hall closet and got out her backpack, which had been hanging there, empty since the last day of school. Inside, she put 3 cans of frozen lemonade from the freezer and her lockbox full of change. She put the $10 bill, still paper clipped to last year's birthday card from her grandmother, in her top desk drawer. Then she went to the garage, strapped on her helmet, and rode off on her bike. As she left the driveway, she could see Evan and Scott's lemonade stand on the corner. But she was careful not to make eye contact. She didn't want to talk to Evan until she was ready to. Ta-da! Impress him. Her heart leaped when she imagined him ditching Scott to be with her. Megan's house was so close that Jessie got there in less than 30 seconds. And less than 30 seconds wasn't barely long enough for her to plan what she was going to say. So she rode back and forth in front of the house about 15 times, trying to pick the right words. "What are you doing?" a voice shouted from the upstairs window. Jessie slammed on her foot brakes and looked up. Megan was staring down at her. She looked huge. Her voice did not sound nice. "Riding my bike?" said Jessie. "But why are you riding back and forth?" asked Megan impatiently. "In front of my house." "I don't know," said Jessie. "You want to play?" "Who are you?" asked Megan. "Jessie," said Jessie, pointing down the street toward her house. "Evan's little sister," asked Megan. Jessie felt like a deflating balloon. "Yeah." "Oh," said Megan. "I couldn't tell 'cause of the helmet." Jessie took off her helmet. "So you wanna?" she asked. There was a long pause. "Where's Evan?" asked Megan. "He's out somewhere with a friend," said Jessie. "Oh," said Megan. Jessie looked down at the ground. "People tell you things," Evan had told her once, "with their hands in their faces and the way they stand. It's not just what they say. You gotta pay attention, Jess. You gotta watch for the things they're saying, not with their words." Jessie looked back up. It was hard to see Megan at all. She was so far up and behind the window screen. Jessie sucked in her breath. "Do you want to do something?" Another long pause. Jessie started counting in her head. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, 5 1,000, 6 1,000. "Sure," said Megan. Then her head disappeared from the window. A minute later, Megan was at the front door. "Hey," she said, opening the screen. Jessie raised her hand in something that was halfway between a wave and a salute as she walked in. Her sweaty bangs stuck to her forehead while the helmet had mashed them down. She was so nervous about saying something stupid. She didn't say anything at all. Megan leaned against the banister of the stairs and crossed her arms. So, said Jessie. She stared at Megan, who was fiddling with the 7 or 8 band bracelets on her arm. Jessie counted 2 Livestrongs, 1 Red Sox world champs, 1 March of Dimes, and 1 Race for the Cure. What's that one? She asked, pointing to a band bracelet with a tiger stripe. Megan stretched it off her wrist and gave it to Jessie. It's for the Animal Rescue League. My mom gave them some money, so they gave us this and a bumper sticker. I've got 22 band bracelets. Cool, said Jessie, handing the bracelet back. Megan flipped it back on. She continued to play with the bracelets on her arm, running them up and down, up and down. So what do you want to do? Asked Megan. I don't know, said Jessie. I don't know, let me think. We could have a lemonade stand. Said Megan, sounding bored. Aw, it'll be fun. Come on. We don't have any lemonade, said Megan. I've got 3 cans, said Jessie. She slipped the backpack off her back and dumped out the 3 cans of frozen lemonade. Her lockbox came rattling out too. What's that? Asked Megan. My lockbox, said Jessie. We can use it to make change. She felt her face getting red. Maybe 4th graders weren't supposed to have lockboxes? How much money have you got? Asked Megan. You mean in change or altogether? Megan pointed at the lockbox. How much is in there? $4.42. 14 quarters, 5 dimes, 3 nickels, and 27 pennies. Jessie didn't say anything about the $10 she left at home. Both of Megan's eyebrows shot up. Exactly? She asked. What do those eyebrows mean? Jessie wondered in a panic. Why was Megan smiling at her? Jessie, those girls are making fun of you. They are not nice. Jessie didn't say anything. She had a sick feeling in her stomach that this was going to turn out badly. Megan straightened up. Wow, you're rich, she said. Want to go to the 7-Eleven? We could get Slurpees. But Jessie pointed to the cans of lemonade on the carpeted hallway floor. The frost on them was already starting to sweat off. We could do the lemonade stand later, said Megan. Maybe. Jessie thought of Scott and Evan racking up sales 2 blocks down. How was she going to prove herself to Evan if she couldn't even get Megan to have a stand? How about the lemonade stand first, Jessie said, and then Slurpees with our earnings. I bet we'd even have enough for chips and gum. You think? Said Megan. I know, said Jessie. Look. She held up a can of lemonade. It says right on the can, yields 64 ounces. So we get 8 cups from each can and sell each cup for half a buck. So that's $4. And then there's 3 cans, so that's $12 altogether, right? The numbers flashed in Jessie's brain so fast. She didn't even need to think about what she was multiplying and dividing and adding. It just made sense to her. Hey, how old are you? Megan asked, looking at her sideways. 8, said Jessie, but I'll be 9 next month. Megan shook her head. That math doesn't sound right. No way we can make $12 from just 3 little cans. Yeah-huh, said Jessie. I'll show you. Do you have a piece of paper? Jessie started to draw pictures. She knew that other kids couldn't see the numbers the way she did. They needed the pictures to help make sense of math. Look, she said. Here are 3 pitchers of lemonade, because we got 3 cans of lemonade, and each pitcher's got 64 ounces in it. Now, when we pour a cup of lemonade, we'll pour 8 ounces, because that's how much a cup holds. You don't want to pour less than that, or people will say you're being a cheapskate. So each pitcher is going to give us 8 cups, because 8 times 8 equals 64, right? Now, we'll sell each cup for 50 cents. That's a fair price. That means that every time we sell 2 cups, we make $1, right? Because 50 cents plus 50 cents equals $1. So look, I'll circle the cups by 2s, and that's how many dollars we make. Count them. Megan counted the circled pairs of cups. 10, 11, 12. That's how much money we'll make, said Jessie, if we sell all the lemonade and if we do the lemonade stand. Wow, said Megan, you're really good at math. She puffed her cheeks out like a bullfrog and thought for a minute. Then she popped both cheeks with her hands and said, "Whatever, let's do this lemonade thing." Jessie felt soaked in relief. Maybe this was going to work after all. An hour later, Jessie and Megan had transformed the little wooden puppet theater in Megan's basement into the hottest new lemonade stand on the block. The stand was decorated with tissue paper flowers, cut-out butterflies, and glittery hearts. It was a showstopper. And boy, did people notice it. Kids in the neighborhood, strangers walking their dogs, moms strolling with carriages, even the two guys fixing the telephone wires. They all came to buy lemonade. And just when Jessie and Megan were on the verge of running out, Mrs. Moriarty went to the store and bought 3 more cans, free of charge. So when Mrs. Pauley asked for 12 cups at exactly the moment that Evan rounded the curve and saw her lemonade stand, Jessie felt like she had just scored 100 on a test and got 5 points for extra credit. So why did Evan stomp off? And how come she didn't feel like she'd won anything at all? We'll read chapter 5 next week. All right, so we just finished chapters 3 and 4, and I know those were long chapters, but they were really, really good chapters because they gave you a lot of detail into Evan and Jessie's character, and as we develop those characters, it's going to be amazing, and we'll talk more and more about that over the weeks to come. But you can see that Jessie just really looks up to her brother and just really wants to do everything with him, whereas Evan's like, no, I'm tired of this, you're too young, and he's even working with kind of his arch enemy a little bit, because he doesn't want to work with Jessie because he's so frustrated over her not, or her jumping into 4th grade and skipping that grade. And you have to wonder, think about this, would you think that maybe he has a bit of a jealous tone whenever he speaks about that? Could be, because Jessie is obviously very smart. So I thought this cartoon was just a little bit funny before we begin, because delicious pitcher of lemonade, but it's really hot outside, and then a fly died in me because, remember, the fruit flies from Jessie. So let's take a look really quickly at Evan and Jessie's characters. And I know this is not the clearest picture, but just go with me here. So Evan over here is in 4th grade, and he's tossing a baseball. He obviously likes baseball, even has his baseball cap on. We can tell some character traits for him. He's competitive. He's not really friendly at all, but he is social. He tends to like and meet new friends, and he's kind of nervous about his sister coming into his new social situation in 4th grade because she's younger than him. Some of the evidence that he's unfriendly, he's not nice to his sister. He doesn't want her to be a part of the lemonade stand. So that's the ways that we can tell that he is unfriendly. We can tell he's competitive because whenever he sees that Jessie has opened the lemonade stand, he's not real thrilled about it as well. And social-wise, he's already mentioned a lot of friends. Even if he has an on-again, off-again friend, and then he has other friends that weren't around, we can tell from the book and use those clues and that evidence from the book that he is social. So we've got Jessie. She's in 2nd grade. She's supposed to be in 3rd grade, but she's going to be going into 4th grade. She loves the book Charlotte's Web. She obviously likes to read. Some of the character traits that we see in her: she's clever, she's lonely, and she's not very confident. I would say she's unconfident. And I like the use of that prefix as well. Un means not, so she is not confident. One of the pieces of evidence that we see that she is unconfident is that she has Megan call the 4th grade gals. We'll find out later, and she does some things. She has a lot of trouble with the girls, but she also had a lot of trouble with the girls in 2nd grade as well. And she didn't really know when they were being unkind to her. Her brother, Evan, had to be the one to tell her they're being unkind. She's also very clever. If you look at how she's counting the money and she's being able to work, like she says, I'm using 2 sides of my brain right now, and she's able to get those math facts off pretty quickly. And then lonely. She always wants to hang out with Evan. She didn't really have any friends to ask to help her with the lemonade stand, and she ended up asking Megan, who she didn't know that well, which is very good on her part to, go and meet someone new. But you can tell that she's still a lonely girl. So as we meet Evan and we meet Jessie, we can tell that they are going to move in their characters. They are going to shift in tone. And the more we go through the book, the more of a tone shift you're going to see. So now it is your turn. You're going to go for it. Go enjoy another glass of lemonade. It is delicious. And you know what? You could even make lemonade popsicles. You're going to complete chapters 3 and 4 questions on Schoology. So there's chapters 3 and 4 questions on Schoology. Again, if you need to go back to the video reading, go back. Go back, check it out, see what you need. Fast forward, rewind, however you need to get to the place that you need to go to, since you don't have the book in front of you as well. Give it your best shot. Now it is your turn, so go for it and have fun with it. We'll start with chapter 5 next week, and I'm excited to see what happens with this lemonade war that's happening.
Thank you for joining us for the Mrs. Silva Reading and Writing Show. We'll see you again later.